Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Related Service Provider Symposium Concurrent Session 2A. My name is Scott Simo and I'm a patent educational consultant, and I'll be your facilitator for today's session. We would also are very excited to welcome our presenters, Elizabeth Christopher, Jennifer Geibel, Tammy Thompson-Cook, all patent educational consultants and speech and language pathologists. The title of today's session is Virtual Techniques for Engaging Families in Speech and Language Evaluation. Our session will last 1 hour with the presentation portion lasting 45 minutes, immediately followed by approximately 15 minutes of facilitated discussion. Please know that each session is being recorded and all participants are muted during the presentation portion. Okay, if we can begin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be here today for the Related Services Symposium and excellent to be with all of you fellow SLPs that are out there. The title of our presentation is Virtual Techniques for Engaging Families in Speech-Language Evaluation. So we're going to be talking about evaluation in the digital world and how we can make our families as involved as possible. We always begin by stating PADN's mission. The mission of PADN, which is the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, is to support the efforts and initiatives of the Bureau of Special Education and to build the capacity of local education agencies to better serve students who receive special education services. As SLPs, all of you guys represent a very large percentage of the special educators who are working with students within the state of Pennsylvania. We see speech as one of the larger incidents, disabilities that we see within the state. And so we know that you guys are incredibly important in this process as we provide education to our students. We also always share PDE's commitment to the least restrictive environment. Our goal for each child is to ensure that IEP teams begin with the general education setting with the use of supplementary aids and services first, begin considering that first before considering a more restrictive environment. And again, you guys are vital in that process. By giving our students means of communication, you better assist them in being able to participate more fully within the general education classroom. We are on a Zoom meeting today. So I just put the controls up here just so you can familiarize yourself with them. We may be really familiar with Zoom controls by now since we are in the midst of the pandemic, but just in case you're not, here are the controls you may see on your screen. We do want everybody to stay muted, at least at this time. There may be a moment later for unmuting, we're not sure, but mute your audio. But if you could also mute your video just so there's less distraction, that would be really wonderful. And then the other thing you might want to worry about is the chat here. So you are welcome to ask us questions within the chat. We are not going to answer the questions as they come in, but rather take that 15 minutes at the end of the session to really fully explore those. So thanks for participating in the chat as well. Just some troubleshooting. If for whatever reason you do get kicked off of the meeting, first thing to do is to reconnect. Secondly, if you're really having trouble, you can reboot your computer, restart it. If it's a question of audio or something, send a question to us and we'll try to address it. And also, if there's an audio issue, you can try joining by phone because sometimes that reduces audio clipping. I know the eastern side of the state was having some trouble with internet connection the last couple days. I don't know with all the wind or whatever was going on out there, but keep that in mind. And you can also contact your local tech assistants if you get really desperate, and hopefully it won't come to that. Okay, our goals for today. We are going to explain the importance of gathering data from families in the comprehensive evaluation process. We're going to identify 3 tools that can be used for this information gathering, and we'll also talk about interview techniques such as the type of questions to use to elicit data from families. So when we think about engaging families in virtual education, we have to start with some basics of family engagement first. Family engagement is the promotion of equitable partnerships among schools, families, and communities to actively advance student achievement through shared commitment, decision-making, and responsibility. Family engagement differs from things like participation and involvement because it implies that there's an active relationship between school and home. The family is not just a passive listener within this process. They're an active engager. They are providing us with information that is not only, um, useful, but essential in providing the education that our students need. There are quite a few laws which have implications for family engagement. IDEA, ESSA, Indicator 8 within the PA State Performance Plan, the Danielson Framework mentions families in several places, both in Component 4C of the teachers regulations, but also within the evaluation tool for educational specialists. We also have the PA System for Principal Effectiveness containing parent and community involvement and outreach. So we are always cognizant of the fact that we need to be including families at all stages of the special education process. Now, we use the term families when we talk about those helping at home. IDEA uses the term parents, but if you delve deeply into that, IDEA recognizes that all families are different. So we're not just talking about mom and dad as far as parents go, we are also talking about grandparents, foster parents, anyone actively engaged with the care of the children in question. And we also promote the idea that a family looks different for everyone. It may be that older siblings are very active in a child's education, aunts and uncles. So we welcome all these individuals when we're providing comprehensive evaluation. There are several core beliefs of family engagement that we all have to follow in order to effectively engage families. One is the recognition that all families have dreams for their children and that they want what's best for them. We can't go into a situation thinking, those parents don't care, or yeah, those parents aren't really, involved in their child's education. All families do care and are involved in their kids' education, but it might look different for different families. And we as professionals, have to welcome all the contributions that families can make. Basically, the research shows us that all families have the capacity to support their children's learning. But there are times that families might need a little help. So we need to provide them with ways that they can really integrate with us and provide valuable information and support. We also recognize within family engagement that families and school staff are equal partners. So the families need to be considered to be on the same platform as all the educational professionals. They're not just a check in the box, they're a vital part of the team and they are a partner. And this can be a difficult kind of, thought process for us to achieve. Sometimes this is not necessarily the school culture that we're involved in, but for family engagement to be the most successful, we should be looking at this as a collaborative partnership. We also see the responsibility for cultivating and sustaining partnerships lies within us. It lies within the school staff. So we need to figure out what our families need and give it to them so they can better support their kids at home. And in doing so, we're going to have a lot more success with helping our kids meet their goals. Right. So one of the ways we engage with family, one of the primary ways is by communicating. And we can take various steps to establish a pattern of communication. The research shows us that homeschool communication is one of the most important factors in building relationships between teachers and families, and that includes SLPs. Um, Families want to be communicated with in ways that are successful for them. They seek good communication skills within their children's teachers. It's considered one of the most useful characteristics a teacher can have. And it does encourage higher expectations by the families and also more realistic expectations as well. There are several action steps for communication. So one of the first action steps is to define our expectations. How often do we anticipate communicating with our families? What kind of communication are we going to perform with them? We need to ensure the positive communication occurs before negative and also occurs more often. So you don't want all of your communications home to be threatening. And I have been on the family side of this where, I see the school's number ringing on my phone and I think, oh no, what is it? It's been a long time since I've been on that side of it, but I have in the past. So you want to make sure you're establishing that positive rapport before something negative comes up. You also want to have frequent ongoing communication, whatever that looks like. In the digital world, that might be texting. That might be through a learning platform like Microsoft Teams. It might look different for everyone, but we do want to establish it early on. We also want to use both no tech and digital means of communication when they're appropriate. So there may be times that truly sending a letter home is the best thing to do, and we want to be flexible with that and use different means. We also always have to be courteous, timely, and professional. And we know that, but it can be easy to get caught up in, say, our emails when we come back from a long weekend. All of a sudden, we have 300. But we want to keep in mind that that communication, being timely about it, is really important. So when we're looking at digital communication, because that is what this session is about, the virtual world, we need to look at certain considerations. One, we have to consider the family's availability and speed of internet access. So do they have the internet and how fast is it? This is going to influence whether we talk to a family, say on a Zoom meeting, which requires a higher bandwidth, or we talk to them on the phone, perhaps. We also want to figure out what types of digital communication does the family gravitate to? What are they familiar with? Do they require training on how to use communication platforms? So if we're expecting them to use perhaps the Remind app, do they know how to use it? And is there an easy way to train them? What's the availability of devices? Some people really do just have a phone. So if we're doing some sort of communication that is better on a laptop, we kind of need to rethink that. We also need to, again, think of any no tech or low tech alternatives to digital communication. And I would consider at this point in our technological history that phone is now a low tech way. And some families, it still works better to contact them by phone. It just depends. We also have to consider communication and equity. So, in order for equity to take place within our school environments for all of our students, we need to ensure that they have accessibility of communication. So, again, we're looking at the internet access, the speed and the bandwidth, and thinking, are some of our more disenfranchised students able to access things in the same way with the internet? Are we providing translations and interpretation services as needed? So that's another important element. Are they getting everything they need as far as being able to understand either what we're sending them or what we're saying in a meeting? We need to think about culture in terms also of what is the family familiar with. We need to avoid slang, idioms, so sayings, acronyms, because those aren't universal and not all of our families may understand those. We also have to take care when we're using communication tools like Likert skills and forms. Not all cultures really use Likert skills. It's something very common in the United States, but not necessarily in other places. So, do our families understand what we mean by them? And also, filling out forms can just be hard and it can be overwhelming. So, do our families have the support that they need in order to be able to do this successfully? And we also need to respect family communication preferences. So you will have families that really want you to email them versus texting or maybe phone them. And we have to take that into account when we're engaging them. So, one of the things you can do in order to research communication preferences is to establish something like a Google form. So, this is my communication preference form. It's only 4 questions long, but it's something that I provide to families, just basic. How do you prefer to communicate on a regular basis? How often would you like to communicate? The next follow-up questions are if we need to have a conversation, how do you prefer to have that? And what's a good phone number for you? This is provided for you guys as a resource within our Schoology account. So hopefully you've managed to access our handouts on Schoology. We have this presentation in several different forms, 2 slides per page, 3, and then just, the big pictures per page. We also have some resources such as this sample communication preference form that you can access the Google Doc of and download a copy for yourself. And it would be an easy way to reach out to your families and talk about communication. We recognize that there are multiple means of communication and that different means might work better with different people. They also might work better in different circumstances. So there are times if you want to discuss something really serious, probably a text is not the way to go. We just don't have the capacity via text to include all the detail we need to talk about something that's really important or really vital. At that point in time, we either have to have a conversation or maybe a teleconference to get together and discuss that. But this is going to differ again per scenario, per situation, per family. All right, I'm going to move the presentation on to Beth, who's going to be taking over for the gathering data session.
Okay, so as we look at the communication with families, we are in such a, Jennifer, if you could go back a sec. We are in such a wonderful place, and we keep saying this, that we are able to gather so much more data from our families than we have in the past. And they will have different components of our comprehensive assessment piece that they may not have held that data onto previously. So when we look at the comprehensive assessment approach for school-based services, looking at academic activities, speech and language probes, contextualized tests, and decontextualized tests, we used to just kind of, before our parents were learning partners as much, we may have gathered some information in the speech and language probe area, but not as much with academics. But now that they're training partners and teaching partners with us, we may be getting more. So we can move on. Okay. So as I said, now our families are seeing a little bit more. So before we may have asked them questions such as like, what were your concerns with their academics? Or tell me a little bit about your concerns or your goals for your student. And they may have been a little broader than they are now. But as we look at the data that our families can give us in speech and language needs of students in a comprehensive evaluation approach, they can help us to see when students are different than when they're at home versus school, right? We've all had that experience with either our family members or our own students in our home where you think they don't do that at home. Well, now you get to say, is the engagement different in one environment over the other? Is one class better than another class? Is he better in the morning than in the afternoon? Are you seeing strengths in academics as it relates to language or speech? And you can talk a little bit more about that antecedent behavior piece and data that parents may not and families may not have held previously. They now hold probably more than the classroom teachers because of the virtual environment that we are in. Now, what piece of information that they may not have as much about in this new environment is the standardized assessment piece. So they may be able to tell you the history of the standardized assessments in the past for move-in students, for students who have had clinical speech services, for students who have had a long history of therapeutic interventions, and especially those EI transfer students. But they may not be able to give you the names or those kind of things. One of the things that is so great about the situation that we're in, if we can celebrate something, one of the things that we can celebrate is our families can provide us some information based on their home observations. So I don't know if you've ever been in this position, but I definitely have as a therapist, where a family member reports, hey, they break down when they come home from school. And you don't really have a lot of insight on why. Now we can get data from families on, what did that student look like after I gave that standardized test, or after I gave some, harder questions during therapy. What did they do? What was their reaction like? Did they have to go take a nap? Did they get a little more hyper? Were they fine? What additional prompts needed to occur for that to be successful? And does it look like what you're seeing? So if I'm looking at fluency, did that student have disfluencies at the same rate or the same time period at home with me versus at home with you? We can do a really nice, it's good data to have for an evaluation to do an analysis of root causes of situations and prompts that help. Okay, if we can move on. And then part of that comprehensive approach, as we know, standardized assessments may not be our best bet in comprehensive assessment at this time. We are well versed as a field now that they're not perfect anytime, and they're especially not perfect now. So speech and language probes are a wonderful way of getting that functional information. And now with families as our learning partners and our teaching partners, they hold so much of that speech and language data for us in the probe section. So one data point that you can gather is intelligibility in different environments. So is there a communication partner that understands them more? When they were on the Zoom call with me doing my probes, what did you hear? Did it sound like the same child as you hear with their peers when they're talking with their siblings? Parents can also be really, really helpful in recording samples. So it's a great data point if you have all the right, signage and everything like that. Recording samples from different communication partners. We've all been in that place where the family says to us, they do really well with their sibling, or they do really, really well with grandma on the call. This is a great place to show the family how to get out your phone and just take a really quick video and send it to me. And we'll talk a little bit about methods for that in a few slides. But this is a great location to have them record that data for us in ways that we may not have had before. And that data is gold for that. So there is a lot of essential family data that they hold that we do not hold. They hold their expectations for the short term. We may have a perspective on what we're thinking, but they truly have the goals in mind for their families, as Jennifer has stated. The expectations for the short term and the long term. We are in a pandemic, and we have to remember that families' short-term goals last year may be very different than their short-term goals this year, depending on their unique circumstances. So asking, what is your short-term goal for this month, this marking period, this year, and then long-term goals? How is this affecting them in social, emotional situations? This is a great data point for the families who know their children the best. Are you seeing more temper tantrums, more social emotional issues, more breakdowns? Is the child's speech and language disability or perceived disability impacting them in a different way than it did last year? We may be seeing upticks in disfluencies or upticks in not using strategies that they were taught previously because of the stressful situation of COVID-19. So that being said, we need to think about when we're looking at all these tools, as Jennifer said earlier with families, is the best way to engage with them to really become partners. And I'm sure that you're feeling that right now. It's Friday afternoon, and I definitely am feeling it myself. Everything right now is just so intense and overwhelming and exhausting and takes 10 times longer. So talking with families about what is really important right now. What do you want to really focus on? And then perhaps putting other perceived evaluation needs to the side for a little bit to say, you know what, we're really going to focus right now on this one identified issue, and then we will proceed to other issues. Continually reframing questions to eliminate blame of families or to make families feel more uncomfortable than they may already be at this point. This is so essential, especially when we keep equity in mind, that, what a question that may not be accusatory or abrupt to us may be for other cultures. So it's important to know that, think about it from their perspective, reframe questions. Explore how the child's disability will impact not only their academic functioning, but their academics now is so much more intertwined with their family functioning. So exploring how your academics needs are in the home as much, and honoring that impact. As Jennifer said, it's sometimes we're all exhausted. It's sometimes really easy to say, yeah, but it's easy to do this, or why didn't they answer their text message? But understanding that there is an impact to that family and trying to be the detective who figures out what that impact is and what the need is for therapy. So we have done this in traditional methods. We've done this through questionnaires and rating scales and parent input forms, and those are all great ways. We're going to look at some of the not traditional methods that we can explore a little bit. So when we're looking, and Jennifer, if you can skip ahead 2 slides. When we're looking at ongoing family engagement and family data collection during the evaluation process, and perhaps during the re-evaluation process, this is a place where we can start and not be as overwhelming. You don't have to create a giant form, and you don't need to come up with enormous data collection tools that will impact your ability to do the work as well. We can do quick solutions. So we would love, as we're talking about these, if you pop some of yours that really work for you into the chat window, that will help us to share out a little bit. But one thing that really works is like a 2-minute timeout, or take 2 minutes at the end of a session. This is really, really nice for reevaluation. So if the student's not new to you and you're kind of looking at, how has things changed? Are we regressing? In some cases, we have to celebrate that because students are being at home in a different environment, maybe they're progressing a little faster than they were before. So taking 2 minutes at the end of your session to quickly do some interaction, whether it's a chat window in the Zoom, a poll in the Zoom window, a quick survey that gets text messaged out at the end, get some feedback from the families if they are present for the event. Again, using simple Likert scales can be very helpful. Thumbs up and thumbs down, some feedback. Sometimes we may not want to ask a parent in front of the child the questions that we have. So things like a Likert scale or a quick thumbs up, thumbs down without the child seeing it, or a quick text message through a Google Doc may help get that quick communication. It doesn't have to be a 30-minute phone conversation that you don't have time for and the families don't have time for and may be delayed. So other ways that you can do it, utilizing a QR tool at the end of a session. So a family member, you put up the QR code at the end, family member takes a quick picture of it and is able to respond from there. So there's a couple ideas that we have, again, with the audio, the video. Those are great data tools and great for progress monitoring if the child starts becoming a child that you start to treat and see. So one of the things when we ask pertinent questions and we start using those tools that we mentioned here is we have to make sure that we say it in a way that gets the data that we want. And I'm sure all of us could come up with this list of ask this, not that. There's a lot of things that when we say things one way, we will get a response that perhaps was inadvertent, a response that perhaps we weren't looking for. So things to not say is, how does your child compare with other kids his age? That is such a loaded question for many reasons. First and foremost, even us as professionals, we may not know the response to that. You know your child, and the data that the parents have regarding their particular child is just wonderful. So comparing them to other children can be a loaded question, and one that even parents with advanced degrees might sit back and go, I don't know, maybe not well. Another thing is the scales. So the use of a 1 to 10 scale in regards to communication. Think about it this way. Has anybody been sitting in the hospital before or in the doctor's office and they say, on a scale to 1 to 10, what is your pain level? I always kind of cringe because I'm not sure what a 10 is. A 10 for some people in my family might be stubbing their toe. A 10 for me means that this is the worst thing that's ever literally could happen to a human being. So remember that where 1 to 10 is so subjective, perhaps you can ask a question like, what do you think the breakdowns are for a child? Describe a successful communication experience. Tell me a day in the life of your child. Tell me times that you don't understand your child. Tell me times where you do understand your child. How does your child's behavior differ from home to school, which is one of those celebration pieces during COVID that we can now say, they're seeing it a little bit more, and now they may have more data on that than before when they were physically not in the environment. And we proceeded to put other ones to catch your interest and think about big things are those communication breakdowns and the problems and the root causes. And sometimes it might be families saying, I don't see anything. And sometimes it might be, I'm seeing this massive thing, and you can deep dive into the environmental factors that cause the communication breakdowns or the language problems. And that's a great place to start with your teaching or with your diagnosis. And we're going to switch it off to Tammy for the part that you guys really came for. So those ways to look at data and gather that data. So what we have seen during COVID is that change in preferred methods of contacts for some families. I don't know about you, but I used to be an email person. And after COVID, I really don't love getting an email. It's too much reading. By the end of the day, I'm done. So families may be considering that as well, where it's just too much by the end of the day. Availability for adults to converse may be very different than it was previously. So you have to think about, that used to work. Maybe I have to change it a little bit. There might be family dynamics. Jennifer discussed this as well. Previously, adults may have been more involved in the education, and now older siblings are the ones who are home during the events. Or perhaps they're at grandma and Poppy's house during the day. And so now the person who has the most data on them is their grandmother and their grandfather, and not their parents. So exploring, is there another individual that might have this information? Of course, with the parents' permission or the family's permission, getting more information. You may also, there's other data concerns with healthcare concerns and families being sick during this time, and all of those things to think about. So Tammy, with no further ado, I'm going to drop it to you.
All right, so for those of you who know me, or whether you don't, I am a speech pathologist with a gadget problem. So I tend to like and am drawn to technology. However, with that said, I'm going to preface that with the caveat of I picked the right tool for the task. If you have a tool and we talk about something that you're like, wow, I want to try this, it seems a little too complex, stick with what you have, because it's better to be completely masterful and rocking it and able to take the data that you need to include in reports or progress monitoring, or getting the information that you need to be moving forward with the student's progress, than to be stuck with, well, I think I need to be using this and it's really complex and you're not getting what you need. So with that, Google Forms is a survey tool that you can do a lot with. It's online, it's super easy, it's easy to share. There are templates that make it easy to include like a quick blank quiz that you can have like 1 or 2 questions that make it down and dirty simple for just getting some information from your families. You can do a Likert scale like Beth and Jennifer had mentioned prior. Whatever you do, if you're getting information from families, I do recommend that you keep it as simple as possible, because you want to be successful and gather the information that you need quickly, and not in a way that overburdens them in an already tough situation. If they're happy to provide a narrative, awesome. But assume that they're doing 5 other things, including trying to homeschool their students. Other things would include like an exit ticket. You can create assessments, you can create worksheets. I really like the flexibility of it. However, again, keep in mind that this is just one of many ways that you can survey your students. You can also do 2-minute data collection. You can ask, while you're in the middle of something else, you can just take a 2-minute survey to get that information. I'm going to drop a couple of things in the chat window just because I found a quick down and dirty. If you don't know how to use it, here's how to use Google Forms in 2 different ways. I like picture support, so the second link actually has more pictures in a step-by-step format than what Google provides. Again, it's just my preference. I like pictures when I'm learning new tools. There's also the weekly check-in. You can just say, hey, mom and dad, every Friday, can you? Or, when you have siblings engaged in that, they can be included as well. It provides a more comprehensive picture of what's going on at home when you're including more than just a student in your surveys of collecting information that's so valuable to what you do and moving forward with their progress. All right, so the next thing is when we're doing video recording, there's a lot of different tools that we can be using. A couple of the ones that we highlighted, one might be new to you. I don't know, some of you may be using this socially, but Marco Polo is basically an app that combines texting, social media, and video chats that is very much like Snapchat, where you can quickly start a video, stop the video, and it goes to the intended person. What I like about it is it's so super simple. You can use it a variety of ways, including capturing that information from your student. Maybe your student doesn't want to type because they don't like to, they can't, whatever. Again, it's only one tool. So this is a quick start, stop, like recording, and then you have the ability to respond back. This can be used for homework for the student or engaging the families. And it's super simple. And then you have like actually a timeline of videos going back and forth. What's beautiful about that timeline is if you're working on articulation or sentence formulation or narratives or whatever you can think of, you can go back to the beginning and watch it in time to hear progress. And don't you want that for all of the key stakeholders? Another tool that we're highlighting is Flipgrid. A lot of you may be already familiar with that. This is a free, simple way to foster short video-based discussions in on classroom topics. The nice feature about that is it allows group discussions as well as being an individualized video. But again, it's whatever you're the most familiar with, whatever the families are using, whatever you can get to use all the time, and just being really flexible about it. The considerations that you'll want to keep in mind are, again, keep it simple. Like you want to be keeping it simple for yourself, keeping it simple for your student, and keeping it simple for your families, because you want to get as much information quickly and easily and readily available. Things to consider is how much tech support or training the families or your students may need. I got to tell you, some of my students are very tech savvy, and others need more support. It really is on a case-by-case basis, but it's something that you'll need to keep in mind when you're picking a tool that you're going to be using all the time. Another thing is considering how these are going to be submitted. If it's one tool that maybe like, they capture a video and upload it, that's another step in the process that could be a barrier or it could be fine. So again, these aren't necessarily new concepts or ideas, but I'm just trying to get you to think about, flexibly, what are the tools I'm using and how can I use them more efficiently and more creatively to collect information. Oh, and before we move on, I also have a Flipgrid learning guide, which I thought was completely fabulous. So I'm also going to drop that in the chat box, and then we'll move on to the next slide. All right. Oh, and I'm sorry, we also have creative communication ideas. Let me add that to the chat window as well. So there's another link for you. When we're using apps for communicating with families, there are examples such as Remind or Class Dojo, Google Voice. It depends on what you want to use. It's a way that you can be at home, masking your own phone or getting a new number. Remind is a way that you can connect with families, and it will allow you to either be on the web or on your phone, send out a quick email blast either to an individual or to a group, and it gives all the information that you need. It is a nice way to communicate quickly. When they respond, it responds to you and not to the entire group. So that makes it really nice in a way that you can have a efficient way to communicate with all your students, a group of students, all your families, only a few families, but they will only respond to you, and that keeps it a little more confidential with that communication piece. When you're using Class Dojo, what's nice about that is it also provides some translation features. So that's another tool that some of my teacher friends have used and said fabulous things about it. And then Google Voice, like I mentioned before, you get your own Google Voice number, which is totally different from your own. It will forward to your phone, but it's separate from what you would use. The only caveat to that is some of the school districts are using Google Classroom, and rather than having some of the teachers and speech pathologists have said that when they've tried to connect a Google Voice account to that, it didn't work because of their feature. So then they had to create their own Gmail account that then hosted the Google Voice. I particularly like Google Voice only because not only can I call from a number that is unique, and they can, families and anyone that I want to engage with me in that, single hat format can reach me via phone, email, or voicemail or text. And the voicemails actually come up as a text. So you can either listen to the voicemail or you can read the text transcriptions. Really kind of fun. I did find a fantastic parent communication app comparison that is quite detailed. So I'm going to throw that in the chat as well, because I'm all about the resources, and I'm a little bit discriminating about what I throw up because I want it to be simple and easy to look at for quick reference. So just check that out. It is somewhat detailed, but it does provide a nice comparison. Just quickly before we leave this side, some other things that you might consider when you're using these tools is the types of data that you can collect. Again, you can do like a quick check-in, similar to the other features that we described before. You can share video links, tools, and pictures and other resources if you're using these tools. And there is a way that if you're communicating with the families, you can have that private conversation with the parents that maybe isn't always something that you want to be sharing in front of the student or with the student just yet. Sometimes you want to have those dialogues and longer conversations and then involve the student in a student-friendly way. All right, so this next one, we have a lot of information here. How we collect data. Again, I want you to use the tool that makes things most successful. If you're a low-tech person and you're still keeping data on a note, on your data sheets that are paper copy, and you're writing it down while you're in the middle of your Zoom meeting or Zoom group or your Google Classroom or whatever LMS you're using or conference tool that you're using to engage your students in therapy or group sessions, just know that there's a way to collect data. It just depends on the tools you're most familiar with. I did find, and actually I found this before, what I really like is a tool that compared or provides lots of information on formative assessment tools that will give you ideas of how you can do this interactively. The ed tech field has really exploded with information on how we can be supporting our learners remotely. However, not everything is considering accessibility on a level of some of our complex learners. In that respect, please reach out to your intermediate unit assistive technology tech or one of us at Patton on the assistive technology team. We will help you through that process. Or reach out to your other colleagues who are in other related services fields or areas of expertise. Coming together as a team to troubleshoot this is a fantastic way to really own the tools and information that you need to be collecting and using. So again, there's the link for ideas on formative assessment tools that you can check out at your leisure. There's lots of hyperlinks within it. And you can use a variety of things within the conferencing features that you're using. So please reach out to us. I believe all the links today will be provided on the Padlet that will be shared later. We've been developing a Padlet out of speech team, but I'm pretty sure Elizabeth will talk about that later.
Great, thank you. So I'll just talk about that now quickly. I did put that in, and all the links that Tammy's been putting in the chat window are on the Padlet. I just moved them up to the top so that they are available for you. If you are somebody who likes to explore tools on your own, the Padlet is a great place. We encourage you to go to the engagement Padlet for that. If you are someone who feels a little more comfortable by seeing a demo of it, if you go to the tools and tutorials, each one is broken apart. So if you go to Tammy's wonderful resources on the app comparisons, you find an app, go to the tools and tricks section. They link to all the wonderful resources our IUs have been doing and creating in both EdTech, AT, and across other initiatives. So look at your local IU for more resources. A lot of times, like Tammy had said, tools that work for AT or IT or Ed Tech work for us. So do ones coming out in literacy initiatives, in other initiatives as well. So look there. But that one is better for you if you're saying, I need direct training. That's a great Padlet for you. If you're looking, I just want engagement tools, the engagement Padlet. We have 6 on that SMORE for you to explore a little further, and they link to the 10 additional. If the information that I presented on comprehensive assessment is newish to you, so beyond the test, there's also a Padlet for that. So at this time, we're just going to open it up for questions. So please feel free to put it in the chat window if you have a question, and then we'll start discussing. While you're thinking of your question, I'd like to ask Jennifer if you can refer to any wonderful family engagement resources that you know of to facilitate this process for SLPs.
Sure, Beth, thank you. So we have included on the Schoology account for this session some family engagement documents. Throughout the course of the pandemic, especially early on, the Family Engagement Initiative was taking a great deal of data on what was happening with both families and professionals, what their feelings were, what were the successes, what were the barriers to virtual education. And we compiled a large amount of information and produced 2 documents called Lessons Learned from the Pandemic. One refers to lessons learned according to families, and one lessons learned for educators. So both these documents are available on the Family Engagement Initiative, but I did include within the Schoology account the lessons learned about families in order to be able to for you to provide them to families as further support in using a virtual platform. We have also created several documents that can be provided to families on how they can help their students at home during virtual learning. So we actually have 2 versions of this. We have one that is helping your students in a virtual world, and then helping your students in a virtual world when you don't have the internet. So how you do those accompanying activities that if, you know, your internet spotty, you have low bandwidth, whatever it is, but that you can still support your students' education, your child's education. So both those are available as well. And then I've also created a tele-intervention checklist for families, and that is oriented specifically to speech. So this is something that you could use as an SLP, but provide to your families and say, okay, here are the things you need to look at when we're getting set up for speech sessions, because families don't always know what to look at. They don't know which device to use. I have had families check in for speech on, an iPhone, which obviously makes all of my materials really, really small. And then we have to talk about, okay, what's the better tool to use for this? So that might be helpful for your families as well, just figuring out how to best support their students in a virtual speech session.
Thank you. And the information Jennifer just referenced is both in the Schoology account and is also on the Patent Supports for Educators and Supports for Families link for speech and language. So that is available. It's also on the Padlets, all with the exception of the latest one on not having internet. I have not gotten that up there yet, but that will be available. So again, do you guys have any questions or any thoughts at this point?